Okay, we're going to talk about rock cycle processes and some of the specific steps in the rock cycle. All right, to form sedimentary rock, the first step is called weathering. Weathering is the breaking up of rocks. So on your notes, there you go. What it says weathering is breaking up of rocks. All right, so how does that happen? What are some examples? Well, water gets into cracks in the rocks, freezes, and then that breaks rocks. You see these cracks in these rocks right here? Most likely are caused by water getting in there, freezing, and breaking. All right, some other things that can cause rocks to break. Lichens grow on the surface of rocks, and it breaks them down. Okay, see these little brown or black spots here? These are lichens. Lichens are a symbiotic organism between a fungus and an algae, and they just grow right on the top of the rocks, and especially when it's wet, and they don't exactly have roots, but because they're growing there, it kind of breaks little flicks of the rock off, okay? And then another thing that can break up rocks is plant roots can grow in rock cracks, and it breaks them apart. You see how this tree right here is growing on this cliff, and its roots go down and actually in the cracks in the rocks and actually help break it apart, and that's why this cliff, part of the reason why this cliff is falling off here. Okay, so these are some of your examples you can put on your notes page. All right, what's sediment? All right, sediment are tiny pieces of broken down rock. So on your notes, there you go. Sediments are tiny pieces of broken down rock. Some examples of sediments are sand, silt, mud, and they can easily be moved by wind and water. All right, here's a very close-up of sand, and you see when you zoom in on it with like a magnifying glass or a microscope, sand looks like little rocks, and that's exactly what it is. All right, silt is dirt and sand and things that get washed down a river. You see this right here in this river, these piles of mud here. That's silt, and you see how that river is muddy. All right, that's been washed down by the river. Mud is another form of sediment. And all of these things can be easily moved by wind and water. All right, so those are your examples for your notes page. All right, what's erosion? All right, erosion is the movement of sediments. Okay, so once you have sediments that have been broken down in the rocks, when they start moving, that's erosion. Okay, so for your notes page, there it is. Erosion is the movement of sediments. All right. How do sediments move? Well, water washes them away. Look at this water right here. It's all brown because it's got lots of sediments in it. It's moving the sediments. It's eroding them. And wind can blow away sediments. That also causes erosion. You see this sand right here, how the wind is blowing it. Wind causes erosion, and so does water. All right. The next step in forming sedimentary rock, after it has been weathered and eroded, the sediments are deposited, or in a process called deposition. Okay, what is deposition? Deposition is dumping or depositing sediment. All right, so for your notes, deposition is dumping or depositing sediment. Okay, rivers dump sediments into lakes or oceans. Wind dumps sediments against large objects. And deposition, the word comes from deposit, and deposition of sediments is like making a deposit in the bank. When you go make a deposit in the bank, you're dumping your money there, right? So deposition of sediments is dumping the sediments somewhere. And this animated GIF right here shows you the where a river is dumping into the ocean, and you see all the brown, those are sediments that are getting dumped or deposited into the ocean by this river. That's deposition going on. And in fact, you see how this river kind of sticks out into the ocean right here? This is called a delta, and that is formed because of the deposition of the sediments. All right, so they build up slowly over time. All right, compaction. What's compaction? Okay, so for your notes, compaction is pushing down of sediment due to weight and pressure of water and layers on top. All right, this happens after sediments are deposited. They get put down in layers and layers and layers, and they have all the water on top of them. and all the weight of the water and the other layers squishes them down or compacts them. All right, and this happens after sediments are deposited. And think of compaction like a garbage truck. Okay, you know how when the people collect the garbage, they dump it right here in the back of the truck, and then when this is full, this little arm comes down and it squeezes the garbage up into the rest of the truck. It compacts it, squeezes it. That's what compaction means. All right. And then finally, for the formation of sedimentary rock, you have cementation. All right, so for your notes, cementation is the cementing or gluing of sediments together because of pressure. All right. Think of cement or drying or glue drying. Once the sediments are compacted, they sort of stick together. You know, you ever squeeze on something like soil, it kind of sticks together. That's that's cementation. It sticks together. All right. It takes lots of pressure and lots of time, but when those sediments are compacted over thousands of years, they cement together, and then you have formed new sedimentary rock. All right, so just to remember, I put a picture of cement being poured and a picture of glue because that's what happens. All right. Now, how do we remember what happens to form sedimentary rock? Well, we have Wedkosi. Okay, so the steps are weathering, erosion, deposition, compaction, and cementation. Wedkosi. So how are you going to remember Wedkosi? We eat Doritos, corn, and cereal. There you go. We for weathering, eat for erosion, Doritos for deposition, corn for compaction, and cereal for cementation. We eat Doritos, corn, and cereal. If you can remember that, you can remember the steps to forming sedimentary rock. All right. So how do you form metamorphic rock? For your notes, metamorphic rock forms with great heat and pressure. All right. It's not enough heat to melt the rock, but it's enough to change it. Okay, in some way, like a chemical change, and it often happens near a volcano. So in this picture right here, you see, you have magma coming up out of the volcano through this little tube right here, and then all this rock around it right here. This rock is getting heated up by this magma right here, and there's pressure being put down by the new igneous rock that's formed on the top of the volcano when the magma comes out. So that pressure and this heat is going to change all this rock right here into metamorphic rock. Now, we're not quite done with metamorphic yet. All right, another way you can form metamorphic rock. Metamorphic rock forms with great heat and pressure. We already know that. That's in your notes already. But another place that it can happen, an example, is at a colliding plate boundary. All right, so where this tectonic plate of Earth and this one are colliding. All right, when they're sliding past each other slowly, the friction produces heat, and these colliding plates produce pressure, and these mountains form because they're getting pushed up by this collision. Well, all this heat and pressure right down in here underneath these mountains is forming metamorphic rock. All right, so metamorphic rock forms close to volcanoes where there's magma, and it also forms where plates collide and there's mountains being formed. All right, so there's not a bunch of steps into forming metamorphic rock. It just takes heat and pressure. All right, how do you form igneous rock? Well, igneous rock forms when the crust melts into magma, and then the magma cools. All right. So for your notes, how does igneous rock form? It forms when the crust melts into magma. And I didn't put it on here. I guess I could add it. And then the magma cools. Alright, so where does it happen? It happens where tectonic plates get pushed down or subducted into the asthenosphere. Alright, so right here you have two tectonic plates colliding with each other. And this tectonic plate over here is getting pushed under. It's being subducted. We're going to learn some more about that in the next week or so. All right. And when this plate gets pushed down, the lithosphere gets down into the asthenosphere. It's very hot, and the rocks from the lithosphere start to melt, and they form magma. Okay. When rocks completely melt, okay, that is how igneous rock is formed. All right. And then you see this igneous magma is rising up and it's forming a volcano here, so that when this magma comes out of the volcano, the lava comes out and cools, then it is igneous rock. All right. So your example is when tectonic plates get pushed down and subducted, they melt into magma, and the magma cools. That's igneous rock. But it has to completely melt, unlike metamorphic rock, which only just has to get hot.